Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I thank you so much for joining us here on the program. You know, more and more, I'm finding that I'm skipping all of the preliminaries that we usually mention at the front end of the program. We'll put them in later to get right to our guests because we always have a limited amount of time. Even if we go an hour and a half, it's still a limited amount of time to really dive into the subject. And one of the subjects that has always been interesting for me, especially being in radio, one of the first designs, if you will, for a radio that receives those radio wave, those frequencies that are coming in, was called a crystal radio set. And it used crystals to pick up these waves. And then it was hooked up to a speaker so you could hear what those waves were, hear the conversion into audio. Well, in the context of what we're talking about today, it's sort of kind of along the same lines of drawing in those waves. We'll talk about what those are with our very special guests. And we're going to talk about the quantum intention and wish fulfilling gem. The title of the book is Chintamani Crystal Matrix, with our very special guests on the program, Hapi Hara and Johndennis Govert. And I want to welcome the two of you to our program and to this conversation. I know that a lot of people think that crystals are, it's woo-woo. Oh, come on. That's just, you're making it up. It's mind over matter. It's a hallucination, et cetera, et cetera. Welcome, both of you. Neither of you are hallucinations.
We don't think we are.
Well, first of all, Hapi, tell me, how did you first become interested in not just the this particular, especially the title of the book, the Chintamani Crystal Matrix, but crystals in general? When were you first introduced to them?
Oh, I mean, you're going to early childhood memories now. It was my grandmother. My grandmother had a rock tumbler. She collected crystals. She would take me to rock hound sites in Arizona. She took me to crystal stores. She'd buy me crystals, and then we would do the rock tumbling. And she had this big bowl of crystals and agates. And when I was a little kid, I'd go over to grandma's house and pick them up. I mean, I loved crystals from day one. I mean, so it just is so. I probably start off more as a little, when I was a little kid, just being a rock hound. I still have those crystals to this day, the ones that my grandmother gave me. Probably one that I really, really remember is she gave me a Herkimer diamond once that she'd gotten in Africa. Okay. And this thing, Herkimer diamonds are like really clear. And I picked up, I thought it was magic. I thought it was just this magic crystal that could do powerful things. So, I mean, I've been probably thinking like that my whole life, like crystals are magical.
And how about you, Johndennis? How did you first become interested?
Well, like Hapi, I had an aunt who was a teacher in a high school, and she taught geology and biology, and so. You could go home. I would go home sometimes and ask my mom, like, "Where's my brother and my sister?" And she said, "They're out rocking with your aunt." And it wasn't music. They were out looking for trilobites, or they were looking for fossils, or they were looking for crystals. So just went out on all these sort of like expeditions to all of these different sites looking for things, and then it sort of embeds this idea of a quest, because it's like, you're not just going to a store where you can buy whatever's there. It's like, you got to find it.
Well, it's interesting. I was introduced to crystals probably in my late teens, early 20s, as I first started working in this business, and was introduced to metaphysics as well as spirituality. Matter of fact, my first wife and I used to go to a spiritualist church in Phoenix. And we would actually, I kid you not, because I didn't drive at that time, we would take our tandem, our bicycle built for two, and bicycle across town to attend. There was just something about that vibe, and they had crystals all over the place. And when I go into some of the metaphysical stores, we have one up in Solvang, California, a Dutch community. I'm probably going to get in trouble because it's probably Danish, but nonetheless, the name is Solvang. You figured it out. Anyway, they have a metaphysical store there, and they've got crystals all over the place. And it just feels really cool to go in there, as well as another one here in Santa Barbara called Paradise Found, again, with crystals all over the place. Let me ask you about this Chintamani crystal matrix. What is that? What are we actually talking about? Is it an actual physical crystal, or are we talking about a theory or a concept or a philosophy, et cetera, et cetera?
We are talking about it all. So on one level, so it's like it exists like so many things on different levels. So, the first level is like, are these, great gems, that are part of our mythology, and it just sort of, it goes all the way back, to our deep mythology, that there's this great Chintamani, which just means, it does mean wish fulfilling in Sanskrit. So that's sort of what it is. Or sometimes you could translate it as mind gem, and it's like, it's not just like an intention, like a frivolous wish, but it's a, like caring for. It has that idea of caring for. So it's something that you put a little bit of thought in. It's like, well, what do you want? It's not like you answer ice cream. It's like, what do you want that's going to, benefit people and benefit those around you? You have to think about it. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask Hapi about her introduction to the Chintamani crystal matrix.
Well, so of course I've collected rocks and crystals my whole life. I'm even a mineral dealer. I live in Tucson. We have the world's largest gem and mineral show. Okay, so I just grew up with so many minerals, and then I got into the metaphysical aspect of it actually a little later. And oddly enough, even though I had done a lot of research, I never heard of this term called Chintamani, this wish fulfilling gem, which comes more from it's a Sanskrit word meaning mind gem.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like Johndennis and I were at the gem show, and I ran across this actually, in a tektite dealer's booth, and I asked him, "What's this Chintamani?" And then Johndennis is like, "Oh yeah, that's the wish fulfilling gem." And I said, "How come I've never heard of this?" And I think that point it launched Johndennis into this quest to go and examine it, because even though Johndennis said he had heard of it, he all of a sudden, I think he kind of had this realization, like, why aren't we putting more attention to this? And why does even the New Age community put more attention onto it? That there's like this essence and crystals that you can tap into that has this like power to actually create things. And it goes deeper than that. But that's kind of how it launched a quest for us, is all of a sudden I think we realized that there was not enough attention being put on this, and that there's even hidden practices around it too.
There apparently is also a lot that is connected with the Chintamani crystal matrix, and just Chintamani in general, from East and West and so forth, from other parts of the world, but also connected somehow. And I'd love for you to, either of you, to elaborate. By the way, it's always a sign of disaster if you put a question out there, but you don't address one of the participants in the panel. But you talk about the connection with the Holy Grail, Atlantis, and other aspects of, for example, Shambhala, which, by the way, I used to play this computer game back in the late 90s. It was actually called Heaven and Hell. But it was just a series of puzzles, all kinds of different puzzles. And as you solved each puzzle, you would get a phrase or a quote connected with, and eventually, I never got through all the levels, but it had to do with this whole aspect of Shambhala, which I always found was fascinating. I'm also very interested in the Kabbalah, the Tree of Life, and for that matter, I guess you might put it in the context of ancient Judaism, because of the traditions and, of course, the conversations I've had with rabbis. Tell me about some of the myths, if you will, and maybe some of the realities, so some of not myths of the
Right.
Chintamani stone.
Well, we tried to actually look into both. So, on the myth level, the earliest myth we could find is a Hindu myth, and it was about the churning of the milk ocean, and it was a fight between the gods and the anti-gods. But the main, the main deity, which is like Father, Son, Holy Ghost, like there's a Trinity, but they have different names in Sanskrit. They were sort of brought in to rescue the gods, so to speak. And they stir the milk ocean, and what comes out of it is 14 what they call ratnas or gems. And one of the gems is the wish-fulfilling gem. Plus there's these other things that come out of this ocean. And the key part of this is that only the god Vishnu, which is sort of like equivalent to the reincarnated God that takes care, from time to time of putting the universe back together. So like a function like, Christ had. It's like putting things back together on this planet. Only that person could hold the wish-fulfilling gem, because other people would use it just for themselves. And then, then they would corrupt it. They would corrupt its use. And then so what it comes down to, the moral of this myth is that all of us, if we're looking for the gem, it's like we have to avoid being corrupted. But once we get this, we can benefit a lot of people. So like the search for it is the purifying process of, so that when we do attain it, we will be using it in the proper way.
I find it interesting too, because this thought came to me as we began this program, of the of the concept that was elucidated in the movie The Secret, the law of attraction. And I was interviewing someone shortly after that DVD came out, which I do have a copy of and I've watched a few times. And they said they left something out. Now, they didn't necessarily do it intentionally, but they left something out. And I, well, really? Okay. Well, what was that? And it was, they said, how do you know that that which you are wanting to attract to yourself has anything to do with your higher purpose in this life? And I thought, that's interesting, because maybe we will draw to us things that we don't have any business having. Yeah, we like it. We want it. Our ego, our personality. Oh, yeah, man, I would love to have a Corvette, or a mega yacht, or whatever. I mean, whatever the desire is. But how do we know that that really has anything to do with our life's purpose and so forth? And it's not to say that this life is supposed to be drudgery, but you talk about the quantum intention and the wish fulfillment gem. Are we talking about just in general wishes, or are we talking about having a genuine, deep understanding or awareness of what the intention for us as individuals ought to be, or needs to be, or should be, or in terms of, let's say, our life's purpose? Happy?
I like this question because I feel like the book, when you put the wish fulfilling gem on the front cover, it's like immediately one thinks, oh, well, here's the magic tool to get anything I want. Okay. And that's really not what the book is about. The book is really about, when you set an intention, there's a huge amount of energy that needs to go around that. Okay. I even lead like some meditational workshops about this. I even have people like write down an intention, and then we do some purification around it. I'm doing crystals and then I'm working with the chakra system. And then we get to the point of like, because I actually teach people how to program crystals with intentions. Many times people's intentions will shift once they've done some work on it. Okay. And that's in a short space of time, which kind of tells me that when you're not aligned when you're in a more of a subjective emotional state, or you're in a state of pain or suffering, you really know what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Or you have like impure intent. And so, like you said, it's like, it's nice to own a Corvette, but is it going to really, what's that going to really do for you spiritually?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so I think a lot of what we think we want is on a lower frequency. And kind of the whole point of that book is really need to get to the higher frequency, dealing more with, you know, like your higher purpose, to really figure out what it is you even want. I mean, the more I meditate about my intentions, the more I realize I think I'm better off not wanting anything. I mean, I think that's really kind of where it goes to.
Yeah.
Is, you know, not always desiring, grasping for something, wanting something. You know, we start the book off with the quest of somebody named Nicholas Roerich. And he was 20. He was from the 1920s. He was like this kind of like a Russian Indiana Jones adventurer. Okay, and he went on a quest seeking Shambhala. He had with him like what was called a Chintamani stone. He'd acquired it from some spiritual master, and you know, that was very much a holy grail quest for him. You know, when I was reading his diaries of his journey, it was at epic levels, and it went lots of suffering. And I think at the end, what he got out of that was, you know, I think it helped purify him as to what he was even seeking for in life. Mm. And he may or may not have found Shambhala, but he certainly didn't disclose it to the world. Yeah. Okay, so the whole point of what he was seeking for, I think, changed by the time he found whatever it is he may have found.
You know, I would love to learn more about Shambhala, more about, and believe it or not, I would love to learn more about another place that's referred to by a group of individuals, very fierce warriors, Valhalla. I mean, all of these, you know, the Vikings' heaven, if you will. And so forth. Fascinating stuff. We are talking here today with our very special guests here on the program. They are Hapi Hara and Johndennis Govert, and we're talking about the Chintamani crystal matrix, quantum intention, and wish fulfillment gem. And we're talking about it right here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it's really a pleasure to have the two of them with us, Dennis, John, and Hapi. And I want to ask you, Johndennis, you have, I want to say, a title that would take half the show to go through, as well as the lineage. Suffice it to say, my metaphysical primer happens to be the autobiography of a yogi. Mm-hmm. And every so often I get drawn back into that lineage because I had the privilege of meeting Swami Vidyadishananda, who is of the Self-Inquiry Life Fellowship. There's a monastery here in Montecito. I've also been associated with the RSF, Self-Realization Fellowship, as well through Paramahansa. And then I met another gentleman who was at the time the last remaining living teaching disciple of Paramahansa, and that was Swami Kriyananda, Sri Kriyananda. And he had written a number of books, and so I had a pleasure of interviewing him before his passing. You seem to come from not specifically that lineage, although it seems like you've got a lot of, I don't even want to say credentials, but experience or life living, if you will, in those particular areas, because you are referred to as a guru. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about Johndennis and all of that.
Well, I mean, I would just express it a different way. I have been really fortunate to study with some really incredible teachers. I mean, just amazing. And one of them is, Kriyanandaji, Goswami Kriyananda. And a Zen, a number of Zen teachers and Tibetan teachers as well, and I've been a disciple of them. So, and when you do it, you're sort of like setting out to like work on yourself. You're not like setting out to like achieve, like you're not enrolling in college,
Yeah.
or like a professional school in a sense to achieve something. You're trying to like learn something, So for me, it was just a matter of like following those paths, and so each of them just added more depth and understanding to what I was learning, and so the good news for me is that it kept me from getting like, beforehand we were talking about people in boxes, it prevented me from like getting into like a box of a certain sort and just like living in the experience, of the moment, which is what it's all about. And then, as you were discussing also beforehand, you were describing people who, had different experiences or they had different philosophies, but you didn't want it to be named, because the minute you name something, of course, somebody then, puts it in the box and they think they understand what it was what came up. And it's like, no, it's what it is. It's not whatever you call it isn't what it is.
Yeah.
And so, for me, that's sort of what it is. And then just to kind of bring it to the Chintamani, one of the things that I hadn't been taught. So Hapi and I worked at a resort, and we were doing, a number of joint lectures, and this was sort of like one of the themes that we worked on. So as we kept improving it, or if you want to call it that, or kept looking into it, kept doing more research into it, we'd find something, and then each of us would say to one another, it's like, whoa, did you know that? So we were looking at what I would just like the iconography, just from the Buddhist side of things. And all of a sudden, I realized that nobody has really taught me this so far, but in every representation of the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, these beings, including Ganesh, I mean, just Hindu side, it's just, you go in, you look, and there's this wish-fulfilling gem that's in the picture.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's everywhere. It's not like it's just in a couple of pictures. It's in their auras. There's like a pile of gems, and when they're on fire, then that's like a sign that it's the wish-fulfilling gem. So a gem on fire is especially about, it's awake, it's active.
Yeah.
And so that really was like a part of the quest. It was like, what does this mean? It's like everywhere, and yet I haven't received a particular teaching about this at all.
Interesting. And I will say that it's almost along the lines of the journey of the Buddha, in that you weren't looking necessarily to be a guru, to be, let's say, a sage, if you will. It just happened through the process that you were going through, because you were just going through trying to understand your place in the universe, so to speak, and how you can be of service and what have you. And voila, the next thing you know, there you are. And again, it wasn't something that your ego, your personality sought after. That is Johndennis Govert, and he is co-author along with Hapi Hara of the Chintamani Crystal Matrix here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I want to ask Hapi Hara about your background and where you are today. I mean, I don't think you have quite as long. Your Johndennis business card is actually 3 pages long in very fine print. I don't think yours is quite as long, but tell us a little bit about, shall we say, your titles or those things that you are recognized as in that respect.
Well, I've been
How you got there?
Yeah, I've been trained in Reiki, and also I was trained in Reiki along with crystal energy by a Reiki master.
Mm-hmm.
And I was already deeply into crystals even at that point, but I wanted to learn a little bit more about energy too. And so uniting the Reiki with the crystals, I think, really ramped up my ability to use energy. And that was right after that is when I actually met Johndennis, and I consider myself a student or a disciple of Johndennis's. I mean, he has taught me a lot.
How's that
And
feel, Johndennis?
She's a great student.
well, that's
Go
good
ahead.
to hear.
Continue, Happy.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so but us working as a team works really well because I was the one kind of more obsessed with the crystals, and I have all the crystals and the crystal energy, and then Johndennis is brings in the yoga energy and the Tibetan wisdom and knowledge. So I mean, it really us working together dovetailed really well, since we brought in very, very different experiences or learning. And but I have degrees in in behavioral psychology, and I've worked in therapeutic types of situations. I mean, but at some point in time, both Johndennis and I both worked at Canyon Ranch as practitioners, both working in astrology, astrogemology. He worked in feng shui, and I also worked in crystal energy and do a lot of lectures. I also it's turned more into, I used to say I just dabbled in this, but it's turned a lot more than this, is, working with, earth fields of energy too. So I've been doing a lot of research about ley lines and vortexes. And most recently, I've been doing a lot of research about Native American mounds. And that led me into finding a whole myth, the Native American Cherokee myth about the stone called the Ulan Suit, which is like their version of this powerful wish-fulfilling gem, which is also connected with a dragon, just like the Chintamani is in Chinese mythology. And it's this powerful, clear crystal diamond-like gem that's being held by a dragon. And the Native Americans have all these legends about it. And so I ran into that while kind of working, we're trying to find Native American mounds. I ran into that, and we kind of got that into the book. But I've been doing a lot more research about that recently. So I keep in all of my travels, experiences, and researching the Chintamani, I feel like both Johndennis and I keep unearthing even more information about it. At this point, I think we could even write a second book about this. It's that much information.
And that's the one thing that I find so fascinating, is that the more you uncover, the more there is to uncover in so many different arenas, if you will. And so in a manner of speaking, the Chintamani Crystal Matrix, the book, which I have in front of me, which you folks can see on the screen as you're watching the YouTube channel version of Tell Me Your Story, it's just scratching the surface. I mean, that's one of the things that I find so fascinating. A matter of fact, we were sort of kind of talking about this earlier before we started this interview about, and I'll try to stay away from the names and what have you, but nonetheless, this particular curriculum that has so many people up in arms. And of course, I think it's misnamed. But the general gist of it is that we want to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The whole truth, the light and the dark, the yin and the yang. And not blame anybody, not make somebody a victim, but understand where we come from all sides. And then and then that kind of explains why we are where we are. Does this Chintamani crystal matrix, and by the way, I love the diagram on the image on the cover of the book. That looks like something that I might draw, and then what I will do is I'll take all of my different colored pencils or felt tip pens, and I will color in all of the spaces, but no two adjacent spaces will have similar colors. I mean, that's sort of my rule when I'm doing this. That's very, very cool. But let me ask you about, obviously there's the issue of the myths in regards to the Chintamani crystal matrix, but there's also an aspect of space, time, intention, matter, and consciousness that are all entangled in crystals in general, not just the Chintamani. And nowhere is this more evident than in the ancient gem archetype of the Chintamani, the wish fulfillment jewel, as it's stated here. Known in legends around the world as the stone that grants your heart's desire. Now that's interesting, your heart's desire, not your personality or your ego's desire. But then that means, and I'll go to you first, Johndennis, that implies to me that your heart here has to do with that inner voice, that still small voice that will guide you through your entire life, might challenge you. I've said this many times. It may ask you to turn left versus right, and it's telling you to go left because there's a little challenge down the road and a lesson that you might want to learn. And it won't put you in harm's way. You know, that's something that I think people need to understand. But it's there to inspire you, to educate you, to do many, many things for you and, if you will, with you. So talk to me about this concept of the heart's desire.
Well, the first kind of interesting thing that is like shocking when you talk to Chinese and Japanese people, if you haven't before, you know, it's like you say, who's going to do something? Who's going to take me to the train station? And if you're an American, you point to your heart. You know, you'll say, I'm going to do it. If you're Japanese or Chinese, you go, I'm going to take it. And they view that as like the mind that they're already kind of connected. So the heart, the heart thing is like in other words, it's an upper function of your psyche, if you want to call it that, of your spirit, of your soul. And the other way of looking at it is the heart chakra is, the Venus chakra. So it's the place of love. So if it has to be something to do with your heart, then it has to be like a higher function because it's connected to love, and then hopefully unconditional love. Not just selfish love, but it's like it's that faculty that is like leading you.
First, I need to jump here to ask you, Hapi, to help us to understand, as Johndennis has about the heart's desire, about this technology, the Chintamani, and I'm going to try to pronounce this correctly. I hope I get it right. Tachyolithic technology.
Yes.
What is that?
Well, that's kind of a term that we sort of coined, and it means basically like stone energy. And so this is kind of getting into the concept of how crystals like quartz are pyroelectrical and piezoelectrical. Okay. So what I do, like say when I'm teaching people how to meditate with quartz, we're going to go back to the heart for a second, is take like a clear quartz, warm it up in your hand, actually put some friction on it and get its energy going. This is like say the turning on switch. You have to kind of warm it up in your hand. And I tell people, put it over their heart. Okay. Because what that pyroelectricity, piezoelectricity is doing is it's a harmonic. This is why they use it in clocks and watches, because it harmonizes ticking. Okay. So once you have it over your heart's ticking too. Okay. It's bringing your heart more into harmony. And I'm kind of like doing this meditation technique of kind of getting people to listen more deeply. Their heart is less stressed. It's ticking more harmoniously. The energy of the crystal is awake. Your heart is connected, and there's like this frequency. It's like where both the crystal and your heart are in harmony then, and it brings the mind into harmony, and then you can like move like your mind center more into your heart. Okay. So to me, this is like sort of maybe a tangible way of working with this tachyolithic energy, but this goes all the way into Stonehenge too, because there was a reason why the Druids or the ancients were putting stones into circles and having rituals in them. Okay. And that's because when you put crystals into a grid, or like stones, like in Stonehenge, you put them into like a circular grid or other grids, you increase the energy. I mean, I've tested this with dowsing rods and stone circles all over the UK. They're like built like an engineering schematic. You go into the middle of every one of those stone circles, and my dowsing rods will spin. And then when I leave the circle, they stop spinning. So that's kind of telling me right there, wow, the stones are creating a grid of energy. And wow. So I think of like the word tachyolithic as being kind of like a word representing like the technology of crystal, okay, or the technology of stone.
Incredible. We're talking with Hapi Hara and Johndennis Govert, and we're talking about the Chintamani Crystal Matrix. That's the title of the book, The Quantum Intention and the Wish Fulfillment Gem. And we're talking about it here on Tell Me Your Story. And we are talking here on Tell Me Your Story with our very special guests, the authors of the Chintamani Crystal Matrix, Johndennis Govert and Hapi Hara. And I want to share a real quick story that was shared with me, and I sort of kind of in a way took it on when it deals with money, when it deals with that aspect of abundance and prosperity and so forth. And I thought, boy, you know what? That would be a neat way to live. And the story, and I'll keep it brief because our listeners have probably heard this more times than they would care to think of. But these two gentlemen, we'll call them Frank and George, all right? And they get together one day for breakfast, and they're having a great breakfast, enjoying the meal and the conversation, and the bill comes to the table. And Frank takes the bill, and he reaches into his pocket and he pulls out exactly the right amount for the bill plus gratuity. And they go on their way, and George thanks him and so forth. And they get together a few weeks later for lunch. Same thing, great conversation about whatever it is they're talking about. The meal was delicious. The bill comes, and Frank, once again, he takes and he reaches into his pocket, pulls out exactly the right amount. And then they go on their way. Thanks so much, Frank. Appreciate it. It was great fun, so forth and so forth. A few weeks later, they get together for dinner. Same scenario, great food and conversation and the things they were talking about. The bill comes, and again, Frank takes it, and he reaches into his pocket and pulls out exactly what he needs. And as they're leaving, they're outside the restaurant, and George says, Frank, this is odd. Now, first of all, I want you to know how much I appreciate the fact that you keep picking up the bill here, the tab. But how is it that you always have exactly the right amount of money for our meal? I mean, how could you know? You have no clue what I'm going to order, and so forth and so on. He says, well, let me tell you a little story here, George. Some months ago, I found this lamp. And it was real dusty and everything. And I started to clean it up and rub the dust off, and so forth. All of a sudden, this genie comes out of the lamp and says, thank you for releasing me. I will give you one wish. So, wow, okay. And he's starting to think, and he says, now remember, you can ask only for one wish, but your wish cannot be that you can have more wishes. Okay, that's probably the only stipulation. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, can I get back to you on this? Sure, no problem. Got plenty of time. So a few days go by, and he finally comes back to the genie and says, I know what I want. I want to have the money that I need, if you will, the prosperity that I need, when I need it for the things that I need. Your wish is granted. And that is how he was able to pay exactly the correct amount each time. He never wanted for anything, didn't have a bank account with millions of dollars in it that he was tapping into. He just reached into his pocket and he had what he needed. And of course, for anything else, let's say he needed a repair on his vehicle, he would have exactly what he needed for that. And I have to, and I remember taking that on thinking, well, wouldn't that be the way to do it? You came into this world with a zero balance. You're going to go out. You'd like to go out with a zero balance. And I've often thought of these millionaires, billionaires, and I half suspect that by the time we're finished talking, there's going to be, if not one, more than one trillionaire. Who needs, really needs that much money or the accumulation of assets to that level, and so on and so on and so on. And I've actually attributed that to the concept of hoarding. Okay? Now, there are some who have millions and billions of dollars who are doing a lot of philanthropic work. That's wonderful. But there are a lot more that aren't. And they're just holding on to it. And that's a form of hoarding. You know, fill your house up with stuff so that you have a little path that you have to weave through, you know. To me, that's kind of what the Chintamani crystal matrix is sort of talking about, that not just in terms of money, but maybe in terms of experiences, in terms of relationships that are aligned with your life's purpose. Am I going down the right road, or have I driven the Jeep off a cliff?
You're
Well,
going down the right road. Go
Well,
ahead, Happy.
yeah, and I immediately thought of two stories actually from the Bible when you were talking, as you were talking. The first one was, God came to Solomon in a dream and asked him, "Okay, I'm going to give you anything you want. What do you want?" And Solomon prayed about it and thought about it, and he didn't ask for riches. He asked for wisdom. Okay, I think we mentioned that story in the Chintamani Crystal Matrix, and oddly enough, he's one of the individuals in history who's considered to have had a magic ring that may have been part of a Chintamani that he had special powers with. Okay, but he needed the wisdom in order to use it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the other story I thought of as you were talking is like Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
who, when it was time to pay taxes, he just reached into a fish's mouth in the river and, came up with a Roman coin and paid his taxes. I would love the ability to do that myself. That's a nice skill. But again, that was very much like your story. Whenever Jesus needed money, it's not like he was hoarding it. He just came up with it.
Yeah.
Just as he needed it.
Yeah. Johndennis, would you like to elaborate a little more on that, or have we said all we need to say on that?
It just comes down to one little moral, which is how generous can you be? It's like the wish fulfilling gem is sort of like as you have it, it's a measure of your own generosity. Because you see this with people who win the lotto. It's like they get the lotto and then they buy a house, they do that. And then pretty soon they don't have enough money to give to other people. Sometimes they do. I mean, they're, their family or something, but it's like, it's that sort of thing. Well, I need $1 million before I can give, away $100, or I need, it's that kind of quality, but it's like, if it just keeps coming from the heart, then it keeps replenishing itself, because it's ever present.
Right. Well, I have to say that a couple of observations on my part, in terms of the last 40 years over 40 years being in this business, when I first started doing little projects for people. And I just was thinking about this only in the last week to 10 days since this coming up to this interview. And for the first 20 years, in the 80s and 90s, I was doing all these little projects, and and what I saw, okay, as the representation was 20 here, 20 there. It was a $20 bill, 20 here, 20 there, 20, 20, 20, 20, 20, 20. And of course it would build up, and of course I would then spend it and so on and so forth. Then we get into the 21st century, and the first 2 decades of the 21st century, it went up to $100 bills. 100 here, 100 there, 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, 100. I'm into the 3rd decade of the 21st century, And it's very interesting how, again, I don't have a lot of money in my bank account. It gets depleted pretty quick, but that's okay. But now I'm dealing in the thousands. I mean, 1,000 here and 1,000 there and 1,000 here and 1,000 there. Now, this has absolutely nothing with trying to keep up with the Joneses or to try to fight off inflation or anything. It's just happening. I'm not doing anything in particular. It's just happening. So I went from $20 bills to $100 bills to, I don't know that they print them anymore, but $1,000 bills, which is nice. And I always do seem to have what I need at a given time to get the things that we need for the household or for the work that I do, and so forth. Are we able to tap into this energy of the Chintamani crystal without actually having, say, a physical crystal in our hands, that kind of thing, or in our presence? How do we, I guess maybe I should reverse that question. How do we tap into that energy so that we can, I want to say, release the angst, the concern over whether I'm going to have a place to sleep tonight, whether I'm going to have a meal tonight, whether I'm going to have this, that, or that. Because, you talked about the Bible and Jesus. And what is fascinating to me is that he even said to his disciples who were concerned about where they were going to lay their heads or what they were going to wear tomorrow or where their next meal was coming from. He says, do you see the birds up in the tree? They don't toil. They don't really do anything of a quote unquote practical deal. And yet look at them. They're taken care of. They're cared for. So how do we access this wonderful energy that can actually, I think, can reduce our stress? Because if we know that we know and we're aware that all of our needs are going to be taken care of, guess what? There's a layer of stress we don't have to be concerned about. We don't have to worry. Happy?
In our book, and towards the later chapters 11 and 12, in chapter 11, we really like talk about more tangible meditations with crystals. They say grids, she's working with crystals, meditating with them. And so it's like actual connection with the crystal and how to start connecting with your intentions, your wishes, your higher self using crystals. Okay. But then I think it transitions by the time you get to chapter 12, which, by the way, Johndennis wrote most of chapter 12. It's getting into more the subtle energy, the more refined, subtler energies, higher frequencies, and we're kind of leaving behind the tangible crystal and going and moving towards the intangible crystal, okay, which is connecting into the Chintamani. All right, so getting back to your earlier question, do you actually need to go find a physical Chintamani to access the Chintamani? I don't think that's completely the point, okay? I think this has something to do with even finding your own inner gem within you, your higher power gem. It might be something locked deeply in your heart. And even using, say, meditation or even yogic practices that we outlined in chapter 12 as a starting point to start discovering your own inner stone. I mean, even says in the book of Revelation, the Bible, about how God or Jesus will give you a new stone with your name on it, like a white stone with your name on it. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's like, are they talking? Is that your own personal Chintamani, where you know who you are, you know what you want, and you know what you need to be doing in any given moment? Okay. And I almost think of that as like a life direction, like stone. Like sometimes I've even wondered, if say angels and higher forces actually know where they need to be because they have this stone inside their heart, and it's like a directional guidance system. So I don't think this is completely about like just connecting to a tangible crystal.
Now, I'm curious, Johndennis, would it behoove us to not, say, find a crystal or a rock? I mean, I walk the beaches sometimes, and I'll look down and there's this rock, and I'm drawn to it, and I pick it up, and I might take it with me because I know there are more of these out in the ocean. They're going to be washed up here, so I'm not actually depleting anything, and I can always put it back. But do you think that that would defeat the purpose of the energies to, shall we say, infuse a physical stone, not necessarily with the energy, but using it sort of as an anchor, if you will, or a focal point? Does that sort of defeat the whole intention and process of working with the energies?
No, actually, not really. I mean, in a way, it's a support. So if you've got a crystal, you can kind of connect to it and you can use it. And you could say the more distracted a person's mind is, the better it is to actually have a physical crystal, because it does provide an anchor. So it just depends on, and one day you could be really calm, and another day you could be more distracted. So on the day you're distracted, you use the crystal. On the day that you're really calm, you just visualize. So it isn't really, no, it's not a defeat. It's actually sort of like a superior strategy. It's like, if you need it, then use it.
Yeah.
And it's like, but don't get sort of like hung up on the fact that I must have it or I must not have it. You're just like free to flow, because it's like it's working with your ability to visualize and your ability to feel. And whether you have a physical one or whether you have the mind gem only, you still have to feel it. So it has to, be able to produce that sense of that tangible energy that you palpably connect to your body. You can feel it in your body. You can feel it in your aura.
Johndennis Govert and Hapi Hara are my guests, the co-authors of the book, The Chintamani Crystal Matrix, Quantum Intention, and the Wish Fulfillment Gem, as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it is a real pleasure to have these two on our program, the co-authors of the book, The Chintamani Crystal Matrix, Johndennis Govert, as well as Hapi Hara. And I wanted to ask the two of you, and I'll ask you obviously individually, Johndennis, doesn't sound like, I mean, I'm expecting Swami something or other. Is that your given name, or is that something that you chose throughout this process of your learning and your experiences?
It's my given name.
Okay. So you just chose not to take on anything other than what you were given from birth.
Well, partly, but if I'm just wearing Western clothes and I'm out, it's like I'm in this context. If I were doing a teaching, somebody might refer to me as like sensei, or like another, like some other type. So it's like I look at it as it's part of the context in which the teachings happen. So there's times when, if I'm just presenting my given name, then it's informal. It's like I'm not putting pressure on somebody to like get this or not get this. It's just like it's just an exchange, and if you're open to it, you get it, and if you're not, you can just let it pass. It's not a problem.
And how about you, Hapi Hara? Is that your given name, or did you choose that, or was it given to you later in life, as it were?
My name is a little interesting. Hapi, and it's spelled Hapi, is my birth name. Okay. So that is my first name. I grew up with that name. Later on, I actually changed my name into something else because I thought it sounded too weird. And now I've come back to it. So So yeah, Happy is my birth name.
Well, I find it interesting that throughout my life, I have done my utmost, especially in the context of interviews, to always get the names of our guests, especially correct. To me, I find it interesting. And there are times when I will jump into an interview before I ask, so how do you pronounce that last name? And I did this before we started with Johndennis to make sure that I had his last name correct. And Govert is your last name. Sounds a little on the French side. Am I correct on that?
Still Frenchy, yeah. We found out that our ancestors were sort of like straddling Germany and France, on that side of the family.
Oh, there you go.
On my dad's side of the family.
The Chintamani Crystal Matrix is the title of the book, and Chintamani Crystal Matrix, we're going to give out the website for all of this great information, and that happens to be chintamanimatrix.com. Chintamanimatrix.com. You mentioned Happy. I have actually been, and it's been a long time. I mean, we're talking probably over 20 years. I've actually been to that Tucson gem fair, or I forget what you call
Tucson Gem and Mineral Show.
a gem and mineral show. Oh my heavens! It's number one, huge, just enormous. But some of the things that you see there, from some of the tiniest crystals to enormous, bus size, or maybe not that large, crystals. The size, how relevant is the size of a crystal to the energy that one can, how do I put this? Because even the crystal may have its own energy, but it's also a conduit, just as we are. I mean, I learned this as a Reiki master myself. I learned that, no, that healing energy, that's not yours. That comes through you. You're a conduit. What about that in terms of the size of a crystal?
Well, I mean, I think size does matter. I mean, I don't have a quartz right on my table. I have one about this size. It's like a big chunk of stungite. But I'm usually telling people that a quartz crystal about this size, a nice handheld one, is a good size for meditating and because of the size of the human body. Okay. So, so I'm always encouraging people to get points about like that are nice handheld size ones. Okay. That feel good in their hand. Of course, the clearer the quartz, the faster the transmission. Okay. But now that doesn't mean that opaque crystals don't have something to do either, because they can slow the light down. Okay. Because they're more absorbent. And sometimes you want that because it can cause you to be more patient, more grounded, more centered. Okay. Where I think like clear quartz is more like, oh, you're transmitting energy. It's more of a transformation. It's faster, it's faster frequency. And so it kind of depends on what you're doing with it, but I mean, certainly like a crystal the size of your doorway is going to be emitting a huge field of energy, which is why, like in places like Stonehenge, they had huge monolithic rocks, which are made of granite, which have lots of quartz in them, because they are emitting bigger fields of energy then. I mean, I've seen this with some of those monolithic large rocks. Like I can tell they're emitting larger fields of energy than like a tiny one does. So,
Johndennis, are there particular crystals that you have a greater affinity to, and maybe obviously, depending upon the circumstances, it'll change, but that maybe you sort of have around your house, or maybe you carry in a pocket or on a pendant or maybe on a ring? I know a lot of people, they do that because they feel that it really does help them, so to speak, get through the day.
I have a few pocket rocks that I have. And I always have a lapis, which is connected to healing, in a pocket or a ring or something, just somewhere, just to connect in and just remind me that, that's what's, that's present. So, like again, it just sort of anchors in, and then you can touch it, and then you can go, okay, I can do a mantra now, just a little bit more easy.
I just find it interesting that there are so many different modalities that can help us to get through maybe certain circumstances, situations. I thought that I might turn to something like that when I would have certain experiences, but I didn't. Specifically speaking of the passing of my eldest sister back in March, and thinking, oh, I need to do this, that, or the other thing. And I think that I did all of the preliminary work years ago by taking on a whole different perspective on what it means to leave the body. Tell me a little bit about the relationship that crystals can have on someone who is preparing to leave the body. Is there a way to make it, I don't know, an easier transition? I mean, I don't think it's that hard a transition.
That's the first thing I should have said that. First thing I thought about was how the Egyptians obsessively put crystals on the deceased. Okay. I mean, they have, when they dig up those mummies, I mean, they are encased in rocks, lapis, like Tutankhamun had this huge Libyan golden glass scarab over his heart. And they got coral, and they got crystal and peridot, especially lapis. They loved lapis. They thought it was more valuable than gold. So clearly they thought like a dead or dying body, it was important to encase it in crystal of some kind, okay? Like these gemstones, these precious stones. I mean, from like getting more like from a more practical perspective. I mean, like when people come to me, because I'm a crystal energy consultant, and people are in grief, or they're dealing with surgery or dying loved ones and stuff. I mean, I'm always trying to do things that are simple, something that's easy to get to. So black rocks are great, okay? Like black tourmaline, black Apache tears, black jasper. The black rocks help us to deal with our so-called more negative energy fields, or sense of loss or dying or death, or return to Mother Earth in some way, or even dealing with like electromagnetic smog or trying to repel negative energies. I mean, even the legend around the Apache tears is interesting because, those are black obsidian rocks that come from the Apache Indian Reservation here in Arizona. And the legend with them is that they cry on the black rocks and give their grief away so it's not stuck in their bodies. And I'm very fond of telling that to people. It's like, you want to move through these passages and keep the energy flowing. And if holding a black rock and giving that energy to that rock helps you do that in a tangible way, giving it back to Mother Earth, what a great tool.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the other thing too, is looking at them as tools. Yeah, they're pretty to look at and nice to hold and everything, but they are for the more, I'll call it the more etheric arts, if you will, energetic arts. They're tools. And it's interesting how even in some of the science fiction, like Star Trek in particular, with especially in the 60s, when they were using the little device to scan, you saw lights going off. And one of the thoughts that came to me was, gee, I wonder if they got lights going through little crystals or something, But as I mentioned at the front end of the program, one of the earliest forms of radio was a crystal radio set. I think I built one. I don't remember if I got it to work or not, but I do remember building one. And it definitely has crystals in it. That's why it's got the name, Crystal Radio Set. So certainly they can pick up the energy or the waves and that kind of thing with a bunch of other elements. We're talking today about the Chintamani Crystal Matrix with Johndennis Govert and Hapi Hara, and you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I'm so pleased to have our guests with us here talking about this subject of crystals and crystal energy and quite honestly, not necessarily the necessity. I don't think that either of you would say that we need to have crystals around us, but they certainly can't hurt. I know that my Vedic astrologer friend, his name is David Hawthorne. He has Eastern astrology that he deals in, the Vedic astrology. And I wear what's called a kavach that has the etchings of my chart on it that I keep against my skin. But then he also recommends certain colors and gemstones and crystals that you want to wear. Like, for example, if it's a ring, you want to make sure that when they design the ring, that there's a portion of the underside where the crystal is actually touching your skin. What is the importance of let's say having a gemstone and holding it in your hand, or say having a ring designed to where it's actually touching the surface of your skin and this kind of stuff in terms of having that contact? Is there a significance to that, Johndennis?
Well, yes, absolutely there is. So one of the questions I asked where I was like brushed back, I guess, and I was asking, I think even Goswami Kriyananda, I was saying, so what is the number one yogic practice that you could possibly do? And he said, get the right gemstone that neutralizes your karma. And then I was saying, no, but this is me. I actually do practice. It's like I'm going to do meditation, I'm going to do mantras and things like that. He goes, no, what I'm saying is get the gemstone that neutralizes the karma. That you've got. That's like your number one step. And so, like you say, if it's touching you, then it's you have access to that energy a little bit more, and it's continuously on. It's like normally it's like we go up and down in our emotions and things like that, but it's like the ring is just like a steady amount of energy that keeps coming in, and then keeps bringing you back to the center.
Happy, how important is our intuition, listening to that still small voice, whether you're dealing with crystals or not, in just going from moment to moment, hour to hour, day to day, and so forth?
Well, I'm always testing people's intuition in sessions I do. And I frequently tell people, don't always go for the pretty crystals with the eye. Hold them and see how they feel in your hands. And I actually have this practice where, like, when I have people, like, I have them build like this medicine wheel of crystals. I get the pretty crystal out of the way first. Like, okay, pick the crystal you like on the table. Let's get that one out of the way. Then I have them actually close their eyes and feel the crystals, okay? And more into like having their body feel it. And always, whatever shows up with that, it always seems to come down to a mineral that their body is craving, whether it could be calcium, iron, might be even trace copper. It's frequently something that the body is craving, okay? Like might be deficient in or needs it for balance. That happens a lot. But I think of crystals as like vitamins or minerals for the auric field. So, we actually are always taking things internally, okay? But, but there might be a reason why we're wearing them too, okay? Like we need the chemistry of the crystal actually on us, because the body of the aura is absorbing at a whole different level than actually ingesting it, okay? And so when you think about, people wearing jewelry and crystals, and we're kind of obsessed with it when you really think about it. But here in the West, we've lost touch with why we are doing it. If you look in the Eastern traditions, they know why they're wearing those certain crystals. Over here, we're doing it kind of haphazardly and we don't know why. We're putting so much money into these little crystals, these pretty little jewels, and we're wearing them. We don't even know why, but we're kind of obsessed with it.
What is the mission statement behind the Chintamani crystal matrix, if we can put it in that kind of a context? Johndennis?
Wake up to your higher nature, engage your higher nature, engage your, some people call it your divine nature, and some people will call it enlightenment. And then it's, so the Chintamani is the means to get there. It's the goal of getting there. And, and it's sort of like the beginning object in the sense that sets you off in this direction. So all along the journey, it is, you could say it's the manifestation of your evolving, even if whether you consider yourself at the end of your spiritual evolution or not, it is part of this continuous process of opening up, evolving, becoming more and more aware, engaging your enlightened awareness all the time, and engaging therefore your compassionate side also, which is the companion to wisdom. The two of them have to work at the same time.
Hapi, I want to ask you about, it's a word that Johndennis has used already multiple times in just the last 60 seconds. And I have said this over and over again, and I really do believe it does apply here. It really does. Because crystals come from the natural world. And that phrase or saying that I have been promoting for years is, nature is our greatest teacher. Your thoughts?
So I know why I'm thinking about the Hebrew breastplate for a second. Okay. So it's, of course, working in crystal energy for a while. And I was raised as a Christian, so I'm steeped in the Christianity. And sometimes I have Christians come to me and say, well, this is witchcraft, this is, whatever. And I'm like, but God made all the crystals. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then like in the Old Testament, the high priest was wearing a breastplate of 12 gemstones, and he had to wear that in order to go before the Ark of the Covenant and administer or communicate with God, okay, over the mercy seat. He had to wear this special costume that had this breastplate. So I think of the breastplate with all these crystals as an integral part of the functioning of the Ark of the Covenant. Kind of like a bridge between God and man communicating. He had to wear this special breastplate with these 12 gemstones. And those come from the natural world. God created them. And, even in Hebrew legend, it was said that God communicated with the high priest through those particular crystals too, on the breastplate, like they would light up and stuff. And so kind of getting back to like the natural world is our greatest teacher, even in something like that profound, like sort of spiritual technology from the Old Testament, they were using crystals. So it's not like New Age, pagan witchcraft stuff. This isn't the natural world, and it's found in all religions, in all spiritual, like especially the deeper, like the really ancient old religions are all using crystals mm-hmm. for healing, for communication with God, for enlightenment.
Interesting. We're talking about the Chintamani Crystal Matrix. That's the title of the book, Quantum Intention and the Wish-Fulfilling Gem. I would highly recommend, before you go off on some tangent with that phrase, the wish-fulfilling gem, you better read the book, or go back and listen to this interview, because it's not what you think. And I think that's extremely important for people to get through, that we get through to them, is that this isn't about making a wish and it comes true, like from a genie or something, but it's really about the intention quite honestly, for your life. What is your life's intention? That kind of thing. This is what we're talking about here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we're talking with our very special guests here on the program, Johndennis Govert and Hapi Hara, and we are talking about the Chintamani Crystal Matrix, and ChintamaniMatrix.com is the website. We will be linked to that website, as with all of our guests, so that you can go there and find out more about what they are doing and the work that they are doing. Do the two of you, whether you go together or individually, do you hold any kind of workshops or seminars or gatherings where you try to share this, especially, let's say, for example, at, say, the Tucson Gem and Precious Stones Fair, if you will?
Well, I mean, I've historically, in the past, I used to be a dealer at the Gem and Mineral Show. And of course, I've held events, privately. And I have done workshops online, but I also work at Canyon Ranch here in Tucson, and that's mainly where I do a lot of my crystal work. I hold workshops there. I do weekly lectures. I do like 3 different kinds of crystal energy sessions, and sell crystals there too. So that's probably mainly where I'm doing a lot of my crystal energy work. I also do sessions via Zoom. I do astrogemology, crystal energy, crystal meditations via Zoom as well.
Just before we jump over to you, Johndennis, Hapi, do you sort of exhibited sort of a, and maybe it's an intuitive thing, sort of a supernatural, if you will, expression, like, what the thought has come to me is the breastplate that the priest wears going into the Holy of Holies and so forth in the temple. That kind of tells me, okay, well, she's kind of tapped in there and she's letting her intuition just take her where it will take her. Is that one of, so to speak, one of your other tools, if you will?
Oh, yes, I am intuitive, but frequently when I'm doing like astrology, because I kind of do this specialty as astrogemology, where there's a crystal aligned with every one of your planets. Okay. And what I do is I take the chart and lay all the crystals on the planets. Okay. And then while I am talking to the person, it's the crystals telling me what karmically needs to happen with all those planets. Okay. It's a very, very different approach to astrology. And that's really the crystals kind of telling me, it's not just tell me what's going on in that position, but what needs to happen to empower, heal, or balance that position by using crystals. Now, and I don't just tell them that, oh, you have to work with this crystal. It's actually telling me the energy that they need to start doing in their lives. Okay. So it goes beyond the crystal, but the crystal is giving me that information. Okay. And so I kind of think of that as like alchemical astrology. And yet, and it is, I'm having an intimate connection with that crystal because I'm kind of obsessed with crystals. So crystals talk to me. Okay. So I'm able to tap into that. So as soon as you said that, whatever that previous question was, the breastplate popped into my mind. Like, oh, that was God using the natural world to talk to man. Yeah.
What about you, Johndennis? Any expressions in that regard?
Well, there's this particular practice called Dzogchen, which means great perfection. And actually, the crystal is used to teach this profound teaching. And it's really, I'll do it quickly and simply. So it's like, mostly we get confused, but we get confused because there's 3 different actions that happen in a crystal. So, so first of all, the light hits it and then it bounces off. So there's like reflection, right? Then there's a second where it hits the crystal and it illuminates the inside of the crystal. So it creates light in the middle of the crystal. And then the third one is the light also hits it and it refracts into rainbow colors and, scatters around the room. And each of those things is just an activity of the mind. And so the problem you could say that we have as human beings is we confuse these three things. You know, we get from time to time sidetracked, but it's that our mind does all of these three things. And so what the teaching is just to sort of like sit with it, to look at it and just see. It's like, oh, you know, what's happening in my life is refracting. What's happening is reflection. You know, what's happening is inner illumination. You know, from just moment to moment. You don't have to like combine them all into like one thing, but it's like, as it's happening, you see it and you realize, yeah, that's it. And so actually when it's being transmitted to you, this teaching, they use a crystal, and they don't use a giant one. They'll use like maybe the size of the crystal that Hapi was showing you before, like a handheld size, that's all. A handheld crystal, you know, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be perfectly clear because it's just part of nature. Yeah. And each of us is like, you know, the mind is natural, enlightenment is natural.
Yeah. We're talking with Hapi Hara and Johndennis Govert, and we are talking about the Chintamani Matrix here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we are coming to a close for this particular edition of Tell Me Your Story. And I always hate for these to come to a close, but we all have other things that we have to get on with our lives about. But it's been great to spend this time with the two of you, and I thank you so much for giving us so much time on this program.
Oh, thank you, Richard. Thank you for inviting us. This has been a great interview.
Well, thank you.
It's definitely been my pleasure and our pleasure to, you know, talk to you, and you ask great questions about this.
Well, I do have three final questions for each of you, but I'll ask those after I let you know, listeners and viewers, that you can listen to this program on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., and Wednesday mornings at 9 a.m. for a special edition of Tell Me Your Story. And we stream those times live at richarddugan.com. We have podcasts at SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many other locations. And as I mentioned earlier, we're on YouTube, where you can see Hapi hold up that crystal. See what that is. And you can see that, I have to say this, Johndennis, that beautiful, beautiful beard of yours. That is magnificent. I love it. One day I'm going to let it, I've had it grow out but I look more like a mountain man. So I gotta keep it cleaned up. But one day I'll probably have as white a hair as you, and I'll love it. I will absolutely love it. So, but folks, we also ask that you participate in the Decade of Perfect Vision, the 2020s, where we ask you to go within and listen to that still small voice and spend time in that quiet, peaceful, calm space. All right? And if you'd like to support the work that we're doing, if what we've been talking about resonates with you, and you'd like to be a part of the endeavor to, as I've said before, change the world for the better for all people, and you can do that on a financial level, we have a PayPal account. It's there for your security as well as ours. And thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. And with that all being said, I now go to my three final questions for each of our guests, and I'll bounce it back and forth so that each of you has an opportunity to think about your answer while the other is answering the question. And I'm going to start with you, Hapi. Who is Hapi Hara?
Who is Hapi Hara? Let's see. Hapi is, somebody who is on a spiritual quest. She spent her whole life seeking out truth and meaning, and seeking out a connection with the higher forces. That's a kind of an on-the-spot question.
Well, and now who's on the spot? Johndennis. Who is Johndennis Govert?
A suit of clothes for my spirit. my latest suit of clothes.
I noticed you chose not to wear a tie with that suit of clothes.
Yeah, I didn't today. Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah.
So, Johndennis, this second question for you: What is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you are doing now?
I want to share the what I've learned about the search for enlightenment and self-realization. And I want to share that with people in a way that is demystifying. That it's practical and it's couched in direct, sort of like direct terms. You can't get away from all of the symbology itself, but that it's like a steady sort of influence, and that's what it is, opening that wisdom, compassion, skillful means channel to be enlightened.
And Hapi, what is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you are doing now?
I feel like I've always tried to, a lot of what I've done is to help people find their path in life. Now, sometimes you have to stop and do some healing in doing that. Sometimes you have to try to figure out, well, who you think you are now, to kind of figure out who you really are. But it's like I've always felt like I'm here to help people find their path in life and it ultimately toward more their spiritual path and lead them towards higher spirit.
Now, Hapi, this last question goes to you first. What is your life's purpose?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the Chintamani. I think my life's purpose is I'm seeking enlightenment, and I'm using crystals to get there. I'm surrounded by crystals, and they seem to be tools I'm using to help find enlightenment. But I mean, my life's ultimately, I think it is to find it's profound union with my higher self and with God, whoever that is. I'm seeking higher union with the higher source. It may be higher being, higher self, God. I'm not saying I know totally what that is, but I'm seeking union with it.
And finally, Johndennis, what is your life's purpose?
My life's purpose is I've been fortunate enough to study with many great teachers. And in a sense, they've helped me so much that part of my gratitude is that I want to synthesize, integrate their teachings into my life, but I want to be able to pass that particular path on. And I think that this particular book, the Chintamani connection that we've got, the crystal matrix, is turned out to be an important step that I wasn't anticipating. And it's like this teaching that just keeps coming through. So I want to share that. And I want to share this particular yoga that my teacher, Master Chuan, taught me, which is called the Spiral Dragon.
Well, the Chintamani Crystal Matrix is a gift that just keeps on giving, doesn't it?
It does.
Yes, it does.
Well, I want to thank you both once again for joining us here on Tell Me Your Story, sharing your stories as well as the story of and the information in the Chintamani Crystal Matrix. And we look forward to having you back again to maybe talk more about this, maybe get into some other specifics as to how we can begin that process. And I know from your perspective, Hapi, as an astrologer using crystals in that regard, that every person has a different set of crystals that are associated with their chart. And that it might behoove them, after having had a reading with you, might behoove them to maybe go out and get a few 12 small stones, and so forth. But I also know, too, that there is an association, which we'll have to get into in another program, with the full and new moons, as well as the equinoxes and the solstices, and all of the other points in that particular circle in terms of one's astrology chart. So we'll have to talk about that on another program, and I hope that you folks will join us again.
Yes, I would love to.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure to do that, Richard.
Great. Well, we'll set that up and have you back. And I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, as we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal and Jeanette, I am listening.